Super Kiwi 64 is a game that has really made me ask a lot of questions about myself as a content creator. This might sound a little bit silly, it's a small game, relatively easy content in and out all things considered. I've covered other games from this developer before and I didn't struggle with the same issues I did here. But with this game, I reached an impasse that I feel like I should face this video off with. I really enjoy Super Kiwi 64. I dare argue that I love Super Kiwi 64. However, in the original version of the video I intended to release about this game, I ragged and tore it down for a lot of issues. And as I recorded audio and went into editing, I didn't feel quite so right in doing so. I went back more than once to the game. I wanted to prove my own words wrong, but I couldn't. The issues that were there at launch were still there unchanged. And I was asking the question a lot, is what I've written here how I feel about the game? Or am I being angry just for the sake of being angry? All these things helped me reach a conclusion about halfway through the final edit of the original version of this video. I was wrong. Partially anyway. Super Kiwi 64 is the second title from Siactro I've covered on this channel, the first being MacBat64 all the way back in the itch.io video from 2020. It was released in December of 2022, and is a sequel to an older project of Siactro's simply titled Kiwi 64. It's a 3D platformer that draws inspiration from the 3D platformers of old on the N64, designed with the goal of providing a 3D platforming experience that anyone can afford to play. For the record, I got a review copy from the developer ahead of release. Thanks again. Makes me really feel like Thundercloud's finally hitting the big time. That said, I intend to purchase a copy on the Switch at some point in the near future as well, and this was a game I was already keeping a close eye on and had plans to purchase and cover on the channel. And in that last paragraph, you might have seen where the error came from my original script. In an effort to attempt to look at Super Kiwi 64 on its own merits, I made a critical mistake of ignoring why this game is how it is. A lot of my criticism came from the fact it's bite-sized. It's a very small game, but it's small to keep the price down. And it's why Siactro always develops games that are a bit smaller in scope. And I do have to keep that in mind when critiquing this game and keep that context in the back of my head. Sure, a game still has to be good and a good experience. Of course it does, and that never will change, be that a free game or a $100 game. But Super Kiwi 64 draws inspiration from its contemporaries while being uniquely its own thing. Something I want to really break down here. Super Kiwi 64 isn't Banjo-Kazooie, it isn't Mario 64 or Donkey Kong 64. Despite its influences, it's uniquely its own thing, and that's okay. Anyway, I'm getting a bit lost between here and the point, and I feel like I'm getting a little bit too emotionally invested in the success of a Kiwi, so I'll cut to the chase. I bring this up so I can build an understanding with you, the viewer, and hopefully help you see the game for what it is rather than what it isn't from my own experience making that mistake. Now, with a new set of eyes on the entire thing, I want to truly answer the question, is Super Kiwi 64 a good game? In Super Kiwi 64, you play as Kiwi, this adorable little fella who's trying to fix a plane to escape this island with your dog friend by collecting some MacGuffins. Kiwi has a few pretty fun movement tricks. He can glide through the air, run faster using this little jetpack on his back, and do a dash that allows him to stick to most walls with this big heckin' Kiwi nose. You can dash in the air, but if you don't hit anything with that dash, you can't dash again until you touch the ground. I absolutely love how he plays. It's super fluid, and after adjusting the camera speed a bit, I was immediately right at home navigating the levels and flying all over the place. I cannot understate how well Kiwi maneuvers, and it is both a blessing and a curse in some ways, which I'm going to come back to. Really, the only thing that I can say jank-wise in terms of movement is, some people might be a little bit bothered that Kiwi can have some sort of big rigs physics going on with some slopes, but I find this kind of thing absolutely hilarious. Aesthetically, this game totally nails its mission of bringing the player back to the 90s. It is a very pretty game, both visually and audibly. It looks like it would be right at home on the N64, the music complementing the visuals, and the visuals playing the art style of games like Banjo-Kazooie perfectly in my opinion. This game does things to my special eyes. There's also weird floating fetuses, but I don't want to talk about the weird floating fetuses. You can't make me talk about the weird floating fetuses, and I'm very much not paid enough to talk about the Super Kiwi 64 weird floating fetuses. You have a total of 8 levels to explore in Super Kiwi 64 with 4 themes with 2 levels apiece, with a forest, desert, spooky, and island-themed areas to explore and visit. These spaces are like little playgrounds. Think about it like this, if like Banjo-Kazooie is a big old chocolate cake, Super Kiwi 64 is the 2-byte brownie equivalent. Lots to do, lots of fun, but it's packed into a far tighter little space. Level design is generally pretty good, especially in areas that give Kiwi room to breathe. However, in other cases, Kiwi's amazing moveset can actually become a bit of a problem. Kiwi is amazing at getting around. However, when you combine that with levels this small, it can come up where Kiwi is just getting to places he shouldn't be way too easily, and I end up skipping parts of the game. In particular, I really wish there were a few more areas where Kiwi couldn't vault off of, because while the idea is super cool and it's really a fun mechanic that I like a lot, there were areas that were trivialized by it existing. That said, admittedly, I can overlook a lot of this just because the gameplay itself is still very fun and engaging, and I like that it leaves space for players to get creative. With that said, there are some areas I feel didn't get used to their full potential. This area in particular was really bad for it, where all the MacGuffins were just in one place. I get where the developer was going here, but man, I just really felt deflated because the level up to this point was really fun and clever, and I felt that just as it hit that second gear, it just threw a bunch of reward at me unwarranted that I felt that I hadn't really truly earned. The other area I wasn't a fan of was the last one, where Super Kiwi 64 does something that I really wanted it to do. It gives you a lot of space to move around in and have fun with this character. But then it ends up trivializing it by giving you an upgrade to your jetpack for the level, making you way faster than you are in any other part of the game. I also feel like enemies were underutilized overall. Kiwi's dash is really satisfying as an attack, and it would have been so cool if there were more enemies to bounce off of, where like you had to hit a timing or a rhythm to get in and do damage, or you had to dash a certain way to harm an enemy. It would be so cool to see this explored more because, as it is, the bones are here for a really cool combat system, which sadly goes underused in game. In general, personally speaking, I would also have loved to have seen a bit more difficulty, but that's coming from a guy who does this kind of crap for fun, so take that with a grain of salt. I just noticed that I was having a lot more fun with things like this desert level, for example, before realizing that there was no risk in the sand itself, and I had been creating artificial challenge for myself. I think, sadly, my biggest issue with Super Kiwi 64, however, is I think that there's just a little bit of polish that's lacking in a couple areas. And it can end up feeling really jarring. Some levels have areas where just running off will get you kicked out back to the hub world, and a few little things here and there would have really helped to make the game stand out that much more. For example, a jingle when you collect your MacGuffins would make collecting one feel that much more satisfying. Or stuff like running a spell check to make sure there's no typos in the script, which did pop up in a couple places. Little things like this, while not a big deal on their own, do add up over the course of a game, and can be really what makes or breaks something in a lot of cases. And there were moments where not having that little stuff here and there, that attention to detail, did cause me to start to build a negative reputation about the quality of other things going on. Most jarring of all of these things was a lack of a way to exit the game properly. Super Kiwi 64 forces me to close it through Task Manager. Something I really hope gets fixed because it's something that should have been made sure was there, and while I imagine it's not here due to prioritizing the Switch release, it doesn't create an excuse for it not being here. Things like this is what takes a good game and makes a great game. Something that I want to call Super Kiwi 64, and something I feel it's super close to reaching, but these small things do put a damper on it, and I don't want to pretend they're not real issues. With that out of the way, I do see some real great places for the game despite these flaws. This game is a great fit on the Switch. It's a game you can knock out in a single charge of your battery with secrets to look for and plenty to do to keep you occupied on a train ride or something like that. And finding those secrets is super worth your time. They're really silly and a lot of fun. Nothing's too difficult, so it's good for anyone to just pop open and play a bit anytime. And minus the floating fetuses I'm not going to talk about, it's a great way to introduce a newer player to a 3D platformer in an environment where it is very forgiving. On top of it, because of Kiwi's fantastic and addictive movement, I bet this game would rock as a speedrun, especially to race against friends in, or for new speedrunners, or people looking to speedrun games on weaker hardware. This game's hella short even on a first playthrough, and while that may be a negative, there's a lot of fun that can be had in trying to get the best time possible in an area or the entire game even. Every time you re-enter a level, it fully resets, and the game has built-in features that make it easy to restart said level at any time. I really think this game actually thrives in this kind of way, and in this space, just being torn into and having those movement mechanics pushed to their limit. This game makes the most of its runtime very well, leaving the player with a memorable experience, and as time goes on, I really hope it can carve a niche for itself as a fun little collectathon speedrun, especially for people looking for a new game or new speedrun to try out. In fact, this is a great way this game manages to circumvent being incredibly short, by being incredibly addictive to go through in spite of the flaws I mentioned, and this game very much feels like it welcomes you to break it and manipulate Kiwi to get to objectives faster and faster. All in all, Super Kiwi 64 isn't perfect. It has some real shortcomings, which sadly do hurt it. But it's still a very good game, and a very fun experience that literally anyone can jump into. I had a blast taking a look at it, and I can say a lot worse of a game than the worst I can say about Super Kiwi 64. I just wish there was more of it. Despite it all, it's a fun game that's worth checking out. Links will be in the description if you think it's your kind of vibe. Playing games like this makes you feel super excited for what's to come in the indie scene. And Super Kiwi 64 is going to hold a spot for me as a game that made me grow as a creator and as a fan. Super Kiwi 64 helped remind me that sometimes the best of things can come in the smallest of packages. And this package is one I'm sure I'm going to come back to and experience again and again. Thank you.
Free floating fetuses.